Hey everybody, welcome to CAF Warbird Tube, the show where we talk about World War II, aviation, history, and so much more. Warbird Tube is produced by the Commemorative Air Force, the world's largest flying museum. Our mission is to educate, inspire, and honor through flight and living history experiences. The CAF began the Warbird movement more than 65 years ago, and thanks to the support of individuals like you, we continue to grow strong. We hope you enjoyed this episode, and now our host, Steve Buss. Thanks for watching and keep 'em flying.
Good evening, aviation enthusiasts. Welcome to CAF Warbird Tube for this evening. Glad to have you as part of our Warbird Tube family tonight. Speaking of family, we're going to visit with the CAF Missouri Wing and their TBM Avenger. And if you're keeping track, this is episode number 178 of Warbird Tube. Now, if you're joining us for the first time, or if you're a loyal Warbird Tube fan, we're thrilled to have you with us tonight. If you do enjoy our content, don't forget to spread the word on your favorite social media platform. We do appreciate it. Now, Warbird Tube is made possible by the Commemorative Air Force. To find out more about the CAF, our events, our aircraft, local units, or how you can be a part of the fun, just visit our website, commemorativeairforce.org. Now, as you're watching tonight, you might have some questions for our guest about the airplane. Well, just type those in the chat box. We'll answer them either during the presentation or before we sign off. Joining me right now from the Missouri Wing, just outside of St. Louis, Missouri, is Bob Lawrence. Bob, welcome to the show.
Good evening, Steve. I'm happy to be here. This is exciting.
It certainly is. And before we talk about the airplane, I always like to talk about the people, and that would be you. So give us a little background on you and how you got involved with the Missouri Wing.
Sure, yeah. So, my name is Bob. I'm with the Missouri Wing. I joined the CAF back in 2009. I went to an air show up in Ypsilanti, Michigan, and it was a gathering of B-17s. And I had no idea this organization existed. So when I got back down to St. Louis, I, at that time, went online, and I'm like, where are these airplanes at? So I found a web link to the Commemorative Air Force, which I'm like, oh, this is great. You know, they're all over the place. And then I found out there was one about 35 minutes from my house. And I'm like, holy cow. My history, I loved history, and I had a very big interest in World War II history. And it's kind of comical because my love wasn't so much the airplanes. It was the ground vehicles. But I found the organization. They accepted me in. I became a quick part of the family. And then next thing you know, it's 15 years later, and I'm sitting here talking with you and everyone that's joining us.
Well, you mentioned ground vehicles, and you have had a few in your collection. I think you still have a half track?
You know what? I actually sold that half track to a guy in Indiana. It was the television show Combat. Mm-hmm. Grew up watching it, saw a half track on there, and 40 some odd years later, I get to own one for a good amount of time. It was just so hard to move that thing around. You know, you had to get a low boy. It weighed 80 tons. Well, not that much, but you know what I'm saying. But I'm glad I got to own one, and I think there's something else out in the future for me. I'm just trying to figure out what it is.
Hey, just move up to a tank. That'll be good.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, that won't be hard to move around either.
No, not at all. Well, what isn't hard to move around is the TBM Avenger that has been part of the Missouri Wing. Let's talk first of all about the overall history of the TBM. Obviously, TB, Torpedo Bomber, and M standing for General Motors, which is the company that made it. But there's also a little difference. People might know the TBF Avenger and TBM. Mm-hmm.
Right.
So what's the difference between the two?
Well, so I want to put this out there that I'm no way a TBM Avenger expert. I've been fortunate enough. This aircraft has been assigned to the Missouri Wing since 2000. So it's been here the whole time I've been here. So a lot of it is rubbed off. The TBM and the TBF, out of about the 10,000 that were made, about 7,500 of them were TBM models. So, obviously during World War II, a lot of airplanes were contracted to a primary and then secondary producers. Our TBM being a later release, because our TBM came off the assembly lines in the end of 44 and accepted into the Navy in January of 45. But it certainly saw its service. A lot of people may not realize. You think of World War II and you go 1941 and you go 42 and 43. And it's really interesting where the TBM was really so early into it. Everyone, it's funny when I talk to friends about World War II or World War II airplanes, there's the super sexy pop culture aircraft, and then there's the others. You have the super sexy B-17 and, P-51 Mustang. And then you have the TBM Avenger. And really the TBM, its biggest claim to pop culture and relevance is, the movie Midway. So Midway is, again, it's a very early battle. It's one of the, it was one of the quick ones after Pearl Harbor. And then the next thing you know, here we go. So a lot of people don't really associate it with that, that far back, but, it held its own through the entirety of the war, which is pretty impressive.
And a very large airplane as well, for those who, we can see it behind you, but to see it up close and personal, you need to get close to it to understand the enormity of the aircraft.
Yeah, and it's funny because a lot of times when we go to an air show or something, you can have the wings out and it looks big. But when you fold that wing in, again, like just behind me, you look up at that wing and you look up pretty far. Everyone who comes out is really shocked by that. And it really does look like a wall. That wing is so high, and it's just an impressive aircraft. The nickname, the turkey, everything else that you hear out there is it's this big, tall aircraft with gigantic wings, and it kind of has this little, stubby kind of look to it at the same time. But wow, what a powerhouse!
Certainly was, or is, yeah. I should say.
Yeah, is, yes. Well, right. Luckily, it still is.
Right. And what's the crew during World War II? What was the crew that was on board?
This is one of the fun ones. So generally there were 3 individuals in the airplane, and you'll hear stories of, I'm going to sidebar a little bit, but you used to go to air shows, and let's just talk about pre-2010. Let's just go there, and and into the 2015. And you would always have the people come up, and this is one of the joys of being a part of this organization, is because you're at an air show, you're with the airplane, and you would have these guys come up, and they would start telling you stories and stories and stories. And so many times we would talk to people, and yes, it was a crew of 3. But every once in a while, you'd have one say, "Oh yeah, we went with 2 quite often." And it's just interesting because I guess you would kind of just realize it wasn't the majority. They always wanted it full crewed, but sometimes apparently it went up. And these are little things that you never read about, but when you have the 90-something-year-old individual telling you a tale, it's shocking. But I think you have an airplane that has obvious you have important roles. Whether you're navigating or you're on the Top Gun turret. It surely must have been an experience, in that aircraft in the South Pacific, you think about it, you can't even imagine. That's what's so amazing about it.
So as we're looking at the slide that we have up right now, obviously the pilot is up front. You've got the radio operator, navigator in the middle, and then the rear turret gunner would be behind that as well. Yeah.
No. And it's an interesting aircraft to fly in. So hopefully if anyone's watching this, if they ever get the opportunity and the TBM is in your neck of the woods and they are offering the living history flight experiences, it's an interesting aircraft to fly in. When you're in the navigator seat and the radio seat, you have this unique perspective of it's like a single seat experience because you don't really see your pilot, so you're just you're there. If you ever ride in the basement or down the bottom, it's a whole different experience. You're sitting down there, you have one little window. If the bomb bays is open, you can see out, you can see down. But if you don't have that, then we have an issue.
And we've seen in this picture, somebody's actually looking out that little hatch there, aren't they?
Yeah. Oh yeah. So when we take her to air shows, we put 3 people, 2 passengers in there to assist with all the duties. But it certainly it's a very unique perspective, and it gets hot. Oh, it's so hot in there. I don't know how. I mean, granted, look, I've got white hair. I'm not a 20-year-old doing this, but my word, it can get hot down there. But it's a fascinating aircraft. It really is. That's a great picture.
Yeah. When you do the living history experience flights, can someone actually sit in that turret, or do they have to be below?
Well, so you're below is where you sit, and then there's a little seat up in the turret, but there's a bench seat that we all sit down on. Okay. So yeah, you can't sit. It's kind of like in the 17 or like in the B-25, like. When we leave, you can't sit in the nose. You don't sit there. You have a seat. So same thing with the Avenger, where you have a little bench seat back there.
Great.
Yeah.
About how many rides do you do on an annual basis? Just a ballpark figure.
That's a great question. Ever since the great event started up in Peru, Illinois, the TBM Avenger gathering. What a great event. I mean, we'll see, a dozen of these airplanes. There's not a lot of these flying. Right. There's a lot of these around and a lot of them are static, but there's not a lot flying. But with any luck, we're doing, upwards of, 50 plus, on an air show season. It just depends on the South, but that TBM reunion, that has given a lot of people the opportunity to fly. So that's a great one, and another thing that I think is just, so how do I say this? It's when and I'm not trying to sell rides, but I want people to understand what it's like when you're up in the air and you're in something this big. And I've flown in a number of, I've been very fortunate in this organization. I have flown in the Avenger, I've flown in the Helldiver, I've flown in all the bombers. There's just something about this airplane. Look at that thing. It is not the sexiest airplane out there, but it is the sturdiest airplane I think I have ever flown in. I once flew, my first flight in that thing was with John Lomar, and he was a pilot. He still is a pilot with the CAF. Great guy. And he said that when you strap in, we have a parachute on. And he said, he made a point. He goes, "There's no way this airplane's ever going to go down." He's like, "So don't worry about that parachute." And he's like, if we ever had trouble, he's like, "I'm landing this somewhere on the highway." So. But my point with sharing that little tidbit is that when you sit in there, you're like, oh, I am. Granted, you and I know you could probably take a screwdriver and enough strength and poke a hole in the side of these airplanes. But when you're in there, you're like, this is a beast. Because you have room. You fly in the Mustang, your shoulders are a little, my shoulders are a little tighter. You fly in some of the fighters, you're kind of like the Helldiver. I was a little tighter. This, I'm like, oh. Okay, this is nice. And that's probably, when you look at the shape of it, because you got the torpedo bay right below, and I think that's what really makes that a very interesting airplane to fly in.
Well, and you mentioned, sturdy. It came out of the Grumman Iron Works, which Grumman was renowned for making sturdy aircraft. The Wildcat, the Hellcat. That's a very all the cats, and there was a picture before of the landing gear where you could see it, and it rather than on a Mustang Spitfire or something, it sucks up into the gear, into the wings. Now, Grummans go the other way. They go up and out.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And when you really get an appreciation when you have to work on them.
Oh, sure.
The gear swing during the annual is a fun thing to be part of.
How many people do you have who are working mainly on the TBM from the wing?
We probably have 4 to 6.
Okay.
But 2 are primarily the ones. It's interesting. The CAF as a whole, we're always looking for members. We're always looking for volunteers. And when we sit back here in Missouri, and I sit with the unit leader and the staff, where do we talk about the great needs? And the great needs really are identifying, more maintainers. Pretty much every location in the CAF, every unit, every squadron, every wing is always trying to find more maintainers. Because a lot of the guys get older, and some of the stuff gets pretty heavy when you're working on it. So, but we're lucky. We have a small team, but they're incredibly dedicated, as you would imagine.
And how long does it take for you to do the annual on it every year?
Oh, there's a question for you. I guess it doesn't take a terribly long amount of time if we were a 40-hour work week and we were all paid staff, and then we would actually get through it pretty quick. It usually takes us about 2 months, 2.5 months, unless you run into an issue. So last year was a whole new fuel tanks, and that was a project that took, I think we were down for almost a year.
Wow.
Because it was one thing to get them out, but then you have to wait. It's like they're like 4 or 5 months out, the company that does that. And then we get them back, and then you got to mark them. Then you got to send them back for the proper fittings in the right places. But luckily that doesn't happen too often. But usually we'll be done. We go down on the last Saturday in October every year. We have a pumpkin drop at our airport. And it's exactly what it sounds like, right? So we drop pumpkins out of our TBM, out of our B-25 Mitchell, and it's a great event. But once that, and we could talk more about that, but once that's done, usually around mid-November, after we get through, early November, and we get through Veterans Day, then we usually go to sleep. Then we're going down for maintenance. And we're in Missouri, so our winter lasts now. So we're going down mid-November. We want to get back. We want to get her buttoned up, ready to go by early March, even though we don't see air shows until late March, early April. But yeah, so we give ourselves more time than we probably need, which lets us, every year we pick a theme. We have to do this. We got 6 weeks left, let's do this. And then we may rotate through the different airplanes to make sure that we cover everything. And I think that's just a general thing most of the CAF aircrafts go through.
Yeah. You were talking about the fuel tanks. Is that a rigid tank or more of a fuel bladder? It's
a bladder. Yeah, okay. Yeah. So, but it's also, as everyone can imagine, that's not something that you change often.
Yeah.
So when you start, opening up the wings and you open up, where the fuel bladders go, it's not like you have people here that, done it before for this airplane. So there's a lot of, yes, we have every microfiche thing. We have every instruction. So the guys certainly knew what they were doing, but it wasn't experience.
Right.
And we were kind of, we knew this day was going to come, and, part of actually repainting the aircraft, coming up, was one of the things we wanted to have done before that anyhow, because you take so much out of the way to get those in and out.
Right.
Yeah. That's a good shot right there.
Yeah. Any surprises when you opened up the wings to get the fuel bladders out?
So I'm I am a CAF member who cannot fly them, nor do they let me work on them. I went home with grease once, and my wife asked if I planted that to make it look like I did something physical today. So I'm administratively minded. These are the kind of things I enjoy doing. I say all that because I'm not sure. I don't remember any horror stories.
Mm-hmm.
I just remembered a lot of very hard work. And I have photos on my cell phone or something where, these guys are just arm deep into the airplane trying to, maneuver this. I know it was incredibly difficult because when you watch them,
Sure.
it was a fight. And then the fun part of putting them back in just to mark where I guess the hoses go into it and then having to get them out again. But, it was a sight. So I don't know if they found anything, overly suspicious, but I don't remember seeing any receipts come through for anything extra they needed.
There you go.
Usually that's the indicator.
I was going to say, that's the indicator when the bills start to pile up, right?
Very, very, very much so. Exactly. So,
And
but this go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, keep going.
Oh, so, cause this airplane, she's had a good life. I mentioned earlier that she went into the naval service in 45, in 45, and she stayed in the Navy until 61. She jumped all over the place. Right when she came out of the factory, she went California, she went down to Hawaii, Oregon, Arizona, Virginia. I mean, the records show all these places where it bounced around. Then when we get up into Korea and back during World War II, when she was assigned to VT-27. So that's how, carrier operations, and we can talk about more of that. But what's interesting is during Korea, and the picture you have up right now, it does have the Korean markings on it. During Korea, she was used as a training. She became part of VS-27, which was anti-submarine, and she was used a lot for training flights off of carriers. So she was on the Kula Gulf, the Siboney, and the USS Boxer. So most of this was on the Atlantic. So she did quite a lot of carrier work, during the Vietnam era. And then after that, she goes to the Georgia Forestry Commission. So now she sits in Georgia, and she gets there in 61-ish. Yeah, 61. And then she sits there. Apparently, she gets put into storage, never changes the markings, has the original Navy markings on her, and this is from the notes. And then at some point, this is a part of the history of this airframe that we can't figure out. Somehow, some way, she gets bought. And it goes down to a trailer park in Florida. Okay, our little L3 airplane we have, when we found her, it was under a deck in some farmer's field. So it's just funny how these things happen, because we're in the 60s and there's a lot of surplus out there. So where are these things? So it goes down to Florida, sits in a trailer park, and all my research, boy, that's a nut I just can't figure out. But after that, it stays down in Florida down to Harry Doan. And Harry Doan, back in the 70s, 80s, he had a fleet of Warbirds. He had B-25s, he had everything, and really puts the airplane back together, and then is able to get it airworthy. And it gets airworthy for the first time since it was sold out, or went to Georgia. It gets airworthy in 87, and unfortunately, Harry Doan has an air show incident and loses his life. And then I think his collection then starts getting dispersed, because then it went to Alabama to a guy named Wiley Sanders, and Wiley Sanders Trucking, all of that, right? So he had a pretty nice little collection. And then we bought it in 2000. So in 2000, it came home to Missouri here. And obviously we have logs. And this is a long way to get to what we're talking about. But we have logs, but what we don't know is we don't know certain things. So we feel that the fuel tanks were probably from the 80s. So we think the fuel tanks were maybe close to 40 years old. And there's, these are little things you learn in the CAF.
Mm-hmm.
There are tolerances to aircraft parts.
Right.
Maybe this can do this. Well, apparently, fuel tanks, it's not necessarily uncharacteristic if there's a little leak, like a little something, but it can't be more than X. Well, there's not a lot of these left. So when we started seeing a leak last year, that's when she's like, okay, she's done. She's on the ground.
Yeah.
So that's why. So if you think those panels were not necessarily ripped off to get out those fuel tanks in darn near 40 years, which is it's just mind-boggling. It amazes me when we still get parts for these airplanes and they're still stamped 1945. It's crazy.
Well,
and I don't even remember what we were talking about. So I went on a whole little course there. So bring me back in.
We're talking about airplanes. It doesn't matter.
That's true.
Yeah. You did talk about the history of this particular airframe, and it's interesting that it never, that it was used, obviously, World War II as a trainer, gets sold in surplus. And when you said the Georgia, I thought, oh, here it comes. It's going to be used either as a water bomber or as a crop duster or insect control or something like that. But it never did. And that, from what I've read and heard, and Parker from our audience also pointed out the same thing. It seems like most of the TBMs that are still flying had that fate, and this one just didn't. It skipped it all.
But it obviously went somewhere to do that. Now, why did they not do that? Now, I have an active email out right now to a couple people's names that I found in the Georgia Forestry Commission. We're seeing if they have any archives, and this may have been done in the past. Nothing ever came out, but now it's my turn, right? So I've got some notes out there trying to learn what have you, but from anything it sounds like it just went in, they got it, they accepted it, and they put it off to the side and never used it. But you're right, and Parker's right as well, because you can find photos all over online of these in service and repaint it to, Georgia Forestry is red and white airplanes. And so I fully expected, so I dove through photos, like maybe I'll see one that's red and white, and then I finally found the note that apparently this was never changed from whatever her original Navy markings were, which I'm honestly not sure of.
Oh, okay. So what we're looking at, the paint scheme that we're looking at, although it's Korean vintage, is not necessarily germane to this airframe.
Most of the TBMs. Okay, so obviously I'm gonna sidestep a little bit. So obviously we are working on a campaign to repaint this airplane. Mm-hmm. If you look at our airplane right now, she's got 4 different colors of blue. Very close. It's got a wonderful patina to her. But most of the airplanes during World War II kind of went to the solid, or Avengers kind of went to the solid blue. But there were tricolor, there were two color. So there was a couple different paint schemes that for the U.S. Navy, U.S. Marine flyers, there were primarily 3. But this picture here, this was of course the standard color. Since when you look up the archives and you try to find archival footage or pictures of VS-27, it would be, it's very hard to find. So I've never found anything that pinpoints the actual paint scheme. Likewise, I'm still in great discovery mode on what the new paint scheme will be for this Avenger. It may be what we see here, but I have a lot of rocks to unturn before we make the final decision, and we can talk about that as well in a whole other area. But so originally we just know it was in the original U.S. Navy colors, whatever that was. I think we're very fortunate with the notes and the records we have on the history of this airplane. There was a lot of care taken, and we still have logbook. We have the logbooks from the 50s. So that's exciting. That's great that we have those. But unfortunately, they didn't write blue. They didn't quite. They didn't. Who would have thought? The flyers during World War II in the 19? Who would have thought that guys like us 80 years later would give a care what color that airframe was? It just wasn't. It wasn't talked about.
Right. Well, and it's amazing too. When you're talking about airplanes, I'll use the T6 for example, because that's one that I don't think anyone will ever be able to nail down exactly how many T6s, AT6s, SNJs were built. Even the most expert people say we don't know, because the emphasis wasn't on what color blue is that, what's the paint number or whatever. It was get it out the door. We need it on the front. We need it on the carriers. We need it on the front lines. And same with the T6s. Mm-hmm. It's like get them out the door. We put out 7 today or whatever the number is, and we'll add it up at the end. Right. So which is why you get with the T6 anywhere from 13,000 to 18,000, 15,000 is about where it seems to land. But it is amazing. Yeah. And you mentioned that, but also the flip side of that is how much more information we're able to gather about these warbirds thanks to the internet, thanks to email, thanks to all the records that are now being digitized and available, Air Corps and all the things that they're doing to get this all out. It's just amazing turn of events.
No, you're right. It's actually mind-boggling, and it's one of those things where I mentioned when you went to an air show and you met the individuals who may have, either they were maintainers or pilots, but then you take a look at, our organization, and I'm fairly certain the people who are with us this evening viewing this episode, where there are people who just know so much. So I mean, there are people on this webinar right now that know 10 times more about this airplane than I do. And that's how it is. But luckily we're all here to keep them going. But it's it's like doing genealogy. We can tell you dates, but sometimes we can't tell you the exact story. And I would give anything to learn the story of this airframe outside of the dates. Mm-hmm. To actually kind of that paint scheme, Now, when we repaint this, we're not repainting it towards the original airframe. We have a whole storyline, and we have a wonderful World War II aviator from the area that we're working our way towards.
Excellent. Well, we're going to talk about that in just a moment, but first, because your wing has some marvelously talented people who take not only still photos but videos as well. So we've got a little a video coming up here that kind of shows off the TBM on the ground and in the air. It's good to see that airplane fly, that's for sure.
It really is, and with some of those shots were obviously here at our home field, which is, we're at an auxiliary field for what was Naval Air Station St. Louis. So the hangar that we're in right now was built in 42 for the Navy. So it's kind of nice, even though they didn't have these aircraft here, they trained steermen out of this, field and some of the auxiliaries. But having this airplane in this hangar and on this field just feels right.
Yeah.
It just fits. So it's fantastic.
Well, please recognize the photographers and the air-to-air pilots who helped put that all together.
So, the CAF is very fortunate to have Gary Chambers. And Gary Chambers is a member of the Missouri Wing, and I think a member of a few other wings. He's on, I believe, work down at headquarters and everything. And he put all of this together for us, or all these pictures and some of the video. This was a composite he put together just so you could have an idea of what it could be like. Another young man is Preston. Preston is a member of ours who is amazing with video, and some of the video we just watched was his as well. And he'll be here actually in 2 weeks to do some good filming of the pumpkin drop. So if we timed this a little different, we could give you a treat there. But those guys are fantastic, and people like J.P. Meller, Jordan Brown, Mike Marino, John Lomar, Clyde Zeller through the years. These guys have got they dedicate a lot of time. Obviously it's fun to fly this airplane, but they all have the same drive and love for the airplane, where they want to make sure as many people get to see what this airplane is all about, what it's here for. And now it's great because now, coming into the whole new generation, it's an amazing aircraft to run STEM programming, educational programming around, because it's got such unique hydraulics and it has all these other components. So that was a great group of people, help share this airplane. And I could go down the list with Dutch Meyer Peter on the maintainer side, Dennis Reed, and Pat Fenwick and all these others. But it's a countless number of people that keep these airplanes going.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Well, now this gentleman, speaking of people who kept the airplane going, tell us a little bit about him.
So this is CAF Colonel Dutch Meyer Peter. Dutch has been a member, I don't know how long. He's been a member, for decades, of course. But Dutch loves this airplane more than anyone else I've ever known. And I've been here for 15 years, so I've met a lot of people through the years. But Dutch was the lead maintainer on this aircraft for forever. And currently, he's still incredibly active. Dutch is, I think he's 91, maybe 92, but he is still active on this airplane. He still goes to the TBM reunion up in Peru, Illinois each year. He's still, reached out to for guidance on this aircraft. His knowledge base is top shelf. The aircraft name right above him, Sweet Louise, was Dutch lost his wife a couple years ago, and I think they were married for like 71 years or something amazing. And the unit, obviously gave the aircraft the name Sweet Louise. There's a couple photos that you don't have with him in the airplane where it's the most epic photo ever. You could sit and talk to Dutch for days and not hear a repeat of a story, going all the way back to his early days. Well, at 91, darn close to World War II.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. No, he's a great man. That's again just the kind of members that we get to surround ourselves with.
Well, the airplane itself is in the 12 Days of Christmas, the fundraiser that comes up every year for CAF. And you alluded to it before we watched the video, and that is you're hoping to repaint the airplane.
Yeah, it's time. it is time. She's starting to show her age, and paint. A lot of people may go down the path of you want to paint it just to make it look good. Well, paint's also a preservation tactic.
Right.
It's a great way for us to strip it down, get on the inside, make sure everything, get the flight controls, taken care of, relooked at, redone. So it's time. We've been wanting to do this for about a decade, and now we're at that point where it's needed. And I wish there was a picture of the back, because you could see where the fabric is now a different color, because we've had to redo that once or twice or what have you. But yeah, so we got the 12 planes coming up, and here's what we're doing. So one of Dutch's good friends was a guy named Joe Berrezzini, and Joe Berrezzini was also a CAF member. He was one of our members. He's a local guy, and Joe was part of VT 27 during 45. Joe won the Navy Cross during the war. I mean, he did some amazing things. I don't have the citation in front of me, but he got the Navy Cross for leading a torpedo run that sank a cruiser. So, he just guts of, steel. I mean, unbelievable. And he was really a great guy. After the war, he started an engineering firm, so he's really well known. It's one thing to repaint an airplane. It's another thing to be able to repaint an airplane with a story and an individual that you want to, just preserve that legacy, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to paint this aircraft in VT 27 colors in honor of Joe. Now, this comes not only trying to figure out the airframe. I cannot tell you the amount of time we have spent on this project on just identifying the proper markings. We know VT 20 or VT 87 we know it had a white triangle on the tail, but I have found some carrier photos from the National Archives where the airplanes on the deck during that time frame were blue. The photograph of his group, where they all sit on the wings,
right,
the squadron photos, you look at that airplane, you look around that prop, and you can see that's a tricolor. They're sitting on a tricolor. I have a lot of emails going back and forth with different people around the country, different air museums. Everyone's trying to dig into this. So while we are in the beginning stages of the fundraising campaign to repaint it, I'm just not quite sure yet on the paint scheme. Because we want to get it right. We want to do that part of history justice, and we'll get there. We'll get there. But little things, and it's interesting too, because there's functions of the wartime that they were on the Ticonderoga. Okay, that's where they were on. But apparently, through records, I think I'm looking at a photograph where they're all blue airplanes as well as some Helldivers on the deck. But there was a time during that month that his group was moved off the Ticonderoga, and another one came on for a specific mission, and then they went back. So am I looking at his airplanes, or am I looking at another squadron? But yeah, so this is a lot. You had very famous people who flew this airplane. You have the famous George Bush story about being shot down. Paul Newman was also an Avenger guy. Mm-hmm. So you have neat stories. But when you can tie it into, a local person from the area with an amazing military background, I mean, that's just opportunity that doesn't present itself every day. Luckily, we had a similar story with our B-25 that I believe he did a webinar, a few months back on. But having his story, the legacy, it's just something I think we need to do. And that's the campaign we're moving forward on.
Well, and you kind of hit the nail on the head. I mean, people know the George Bush story, and there are TBMs that carry his name. Yours did for a while as well. And that's great, because we need to remember that part of history. But to be able to tie it to someone from the community, from your community, who did great things in the war, and then at the end walked away and just became a successful businessman, like so many of the other veterans. They just went back to life, right? But when you tie that back in, just imagine the young people who will come out and see the airplane after it's painted, and you tell them that story, and suddenly I'd like to think that World War II becomes more than just something you read about in the history book, or you watch a TV show or a movie or whatever. They can relate it back to their community and start to think about, oh, there were a lot of people from the St. Louis area who were involved in the war, and let's find out more. And so that's an amazing tie.
It really is, and there's that. A lot of us talk about this now. We can remember what our grandfathers did. Most of us. Mm-hmm. Very few know what the great-grandfathers did.
Right.
So when you really think about it, these younger generations, if you don't have a physical connection, or you don't have a family or a physical connection to it, what does that airplane mean? So this way, we can build a storyline. So some of the things we'll be sharing in coming months, on our social media platform and others, are the fact that I have some 8mm video of Joe telling some stories that are being digitized that we're going to be able to share. So the idea is that you come out and you tour our campus, you have this airplane, let us introduce you to the man who did this. And he did amazing things. One of the amazing stories is that he apparently he was on a torpedo run and got called back right at the surrender of Japan. He was actually out on a mission and got called back because that, so many opportunities to share these stories exist, but sometimes you can't make the connection. And we're so fortunate to be able to make the connection. The flying dagger on the airplane, the photo right there, that was obviously Joe's squadron. Actually, I think the side of the airplane right there still says George Bush.
Right.
So yeah, right now it says Joe Berzini. We changed that a couple years back. So, but yeah, so we'll get this right. We'll definitely get this right.
Well, and the good thing is that you're doing the research at the same time you're raising the funds, so they kind of go hand in hand. Yeah.
Like I said, we know stuff about the airframe, the current airframe, but to put his story into it, there's so many. I'm talking to a number of family members of his. They're all so excited. In front of this airplane, we hosted one of his great niece's wedding reception and ceremony. So this airplane is really part of the community, and this is going to help us, just really share that story.
Excellent. Well, speaking of community, we alluded to it a little earlier, but in just 2 weeks, you've got the pumpkin drop coming up.
Yeah. This is a big airport open house. There go the pumpkins, which you can't see in those. What we do is we carve those pumpkins out and we fill them with red, white, and blue flour, or chalk, and we torpedo a car, or we bomb drop on a car here at this airport. Little general aviation guys, they throw those little hand-sized pumpkins out. Mm-hmm. No, but every year our Navy TBM Avenger goes against our Army Air Corps B-25, and it's always a pride mashup. Who's going to win this year? And these pilots, boy, they do mathematics, they do wind speed, they do approach. I mean, they'll draw things up on the dry erase board in the office, and guys like me who were not military aviators that ever had to worry about dropping anything, I'm looking at it, just feel like I'm in grade school again, trying to learn algebra for the first time. So it's really, they take this very serious. And we'll get about 800 people out to the airport. We're a small airport in northern St. Charles County. But we'll get a good head count. They come out every year, and it's a blast. It's a blast.
It certainly is. Yeah. And you said there's a special pumpkin dropping rig that you put inside the bomb bay. Yeah.
Well, you can kind of see it in that photo because I think it's called the Mark 7. I think that's the version we're on. And it goes up into the bomb bay, and it attaches to the rigging. The brown you see there, obviously it's a wooden floor where they pull and those flop open, and then all these pumpkins come out. It's Yeah, I wish more airports would do it, because I know some airports do like a flower bag drop.
Hmm.
I've seen those in other airports, but I haven't seen a lot of them that, that drop pumpkins. It's a heck of a way to usher in the holiday, or the Halloween weekend.
Yeah.
We do this it's a Saturday before Halloween is when we have this event. I think we've done it for almost 13 years now.
Wow.
So, oh, good, lucky number. There we go. That's a Halloween number for you.
There you go.
Maybe I'm going to retract that, set it aside, and just call it 14.
There you go.
So yeah, but it's a great event. If anyone's local, please come out. Last Saturday in October, and we do it. We go up at about noon.
Okay. Sounds good. And behind you, not only the airplane,
Yes.
but there's a very special story that goes with that torpedo that's sitting there as well.
So that's a Mark 13. That was, obviously lasted during the war, and it, went through many modifications. So there was a CAF member named Paul, great guy, and he was a sheet metal worker. So he decided that he was going to make a replica of that torpedo. And I mean, it's got the gold propeller on the back. I mean, he went through great details to make sure this was accurate in size. 13 foot long. I mean, 22 inches wide, I think. But so he decided to fabricate this from scratch, the rigging inside, the outside. Got about halfway done, and he didn't build it here. He decided to build it in his garage at his house, and he got about halfway done, and his garage was half open. Apparently someone decided to, or was just driving by the neighborhood and felt it necessary to alert the local police department that one of the neighbors in the neighborhood was making a 13-foot bomb, and they may want to check it out. Apparently, police cars swarmed the home for the local neighbor who made World War II simulated bombs. So it's great. Every time I walk by it, I'll never forget that story, because that was early on when I joined, and he did a heck of a job. I know this angle doesn't do too much of it, but it's a big weapon. So yeah, so his name was Paul. Good guy. So we thank him every day for having it, because this is the kind of thing that you put underneath it when the kids come out and families come out. They can really have some association, and we were able to really put the story together. So that is a fun story. You're right. That's a good one.
And of course, the nickname of the TBM was the Turkey. So happy Turkey Day coming up in just about a month, right?
Exactly. Yeah. That is you'll see it on our social media. We'll put a post out there every year that says Happy Turkey Day, and it's our little salute to the airplane. So it's a good one.
Definitely. Before we wrap up tonight, Bob, if someone wants to find out more about the Missouri Wing, the pumpkin drop, you have activities going on all year round. If they're in the St. Louis area, they want to join, how is the best way for them to get a hold of you?
So our website obviously is a great way, and that is CAFMO, so CAF Missouri, but CAFMO.org. You can get us there. Obviously, you can also find us on Facebook. Social media is where a lot of our presence is. And if you're on social media, find us at Facebook, CAF Missouri Wing. You should be able to search us very easily. Send us a message on that. It's usually myself or two others that respond. And, I'll tell you, look, if you're interested, and this goes to a lot of the units around the country, Saturdays are usually our main work days in the CAF. So look us up, find where we're at, come out, talk to us. I promise you, any unit around the country would be so happy to have you participate. And there's all kinds of things too. Like I said, I'm not a pilot, I'm not a maintainer. I was just a business guy. And like I said, 15 years later, here I sit, talking to y'all tonight about this airplane. So volunteers of every level, every type are always needed.
Excellent. Bob, thank you for being with us tonight and sharing some of the stories of the TBM. And we look forward to seeing that in the 12 Planes of Christmas coming up in December.
We're excited about it, and thanks again for having me on.
Yes, and thank you for joining us tonight. We'd like to hear your thoughts on tonight's episode or any ideas you might have for a future topic. Feel free to drop us a line at media@cafhq.org. Now, if you liked what you saw tonight, please share it across your social media platforms. And remember, if you are a subscriber on YouTube, click the bell icon. You'll get notifications when our new episodes are posted. So until next time, I'm Steve Boss. Have a great night. Wishing you blue skies and tailwinds.